putting this together, I definitely had a problem keeping it short. So I hope this isn't too awful long, but um, I've been thinking a lot about the series that we went through during the summer on the common questions, and that was pretty good. And I know for a lot of us, probably it was one of those questions that kind of got us looking in things in this direction. And for me, it was one of those. But just like we were going through with this Torah portion this week, Noah standing out in his generation, being kind of different, definitely different. And I don't know about you, but I know as we've came in this direction, sometimes you feel different, right? We feel a little weird, kind of like the outsiders, do things a little bit different. And and really, we're kind of in a tough place because we're approaching things kind of in reverse from the book of Acts, whereas they started off close to the master, knowing him and his ways, and things kind of start moving off, and we see a lot of problems come up by the end of the book. And as we're seeking to restore things back to the way they should be, we're kind of at the back trying to almost move forward, kind of back to the beginning. And this is kind of an example of what I'm talking about here and where I want to go from. In Acts 15, common passage that we talk about a lot, therefore I judge not to trouble those from among the Gentiles who are turning to God, but to write them to abstain from the contamination of idols, and from sexual immorality, from what is strangled, and from blood. For Moses from ancient generations has had in every city those who proclaim him, since he is read in the synagogues every Shabbat. And this is a much misused passage. Just recently somebody had talked to me about this and tried making the point that, these Gentiles that are turning, these are the only 4 things they need to worry about. If you get this right, that's all that's required. And I said, really? It's like, so nothing about theft or coveting, honoring your parents, lying, etc. I mean, we can go on and on, all the stuff not covered in here. So we're good on all that stuff, and as long as we're doing these 4, right, we're good. And but we understand this to mean that these were the 4 essential things that Gentiles that are turning to God needed to do in order to fellowship with the Jewish people. Now, these were the 4 immediate things that needed to be corrected, and all the other things were part of those steps of discipleship. But there's something that's left out in this discussion of this passage quite often, and that's those steps, some of the other essential things mentioned here that have been taken away from Gentiles turning to God. And you think about it, had the Shabbat taken away, had the synagogue taken away, and the Torah taken away. We've had the day, the place, and the content all removed. And so now with those 3 things missing, even the 4 essential things talked about in here have lost their definition, don't even know really what they mean. Can't even have a discussion much on those 4 because most people don't even know what those 4 are talking about. Maybe 1, but the context has been lost because we're not the day's been moved to another day. The place has been moved from the synagogue to the church, and the content, the Torah, has been moved really to the commentary on it. If you think about it, the rest of the scripture is more or less just the commentary on the Torah. So you're listening to a lot of commentators talking about stuff you have no clue about. And I really think that in order to restore things back to the way they should have been in their rightful place. Those three things need to get back in order in a proper way. We need to have the day, the place, and the content back so that we can properly be discipled and properly learn. But of course, then there's that common problem, the moment you want to bring up Shabbat or the synagogue or the Torah, immediately it goes to, you're just wanting to work for your salvation. Want to go back to what he died and got rid of, right? Grace and works, those are opposed. Grace and law, we're taught all of that. And that's truly because we have lost our definitions and the meanings behind all that. And I like to just simply put it this way. I'm building up to something here. Grace, and just simply put, you could just put it God's love for us. And 1 John 4, it says, the love of God was revealed among us by this, that God sent his one and only Son into the world so that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atonement for our sins. And when we didn't deserve it, it wasn't that we were loving God, but it was that he loved us. He gave us grace. The atonement, the justification, is based on his love for us, nothing we've done. But works, so here's where we've kind of lost the meaning. Works, I like to put it this way, or works, our obedience is really our love for God. It's a two-way thing, right? We're supposed to be in a relationship with him. Grace is his love for us. Works, as you want to put it, more or less is our love for God. Not our fear, not being our fear of God, but our love for God. That's an important thing. So question, do we love God? Do you love God? Do I love God? That's a silly question, because I know if you were to go around and I asked probably anyone in here, you love God? Hopefully the answer would be, well, of course I do. And if I went around to any church-going folk, I'd say majority. There may be an outlier here or there that might tell you the truth, but I kind of doubt it. They would say, yes, I love God. So how do you define loving God? What does it mean to love God? Or instead of that, how does God define how we love him? Because that's really what's important, right? It's not how we want our definition, but it's really his definition. 1 John 2, now we know that we have come to know him by this, if we keep his commandments. The one who says, I have come to know him, and does not keep his commandments, is a liar. And the truth is not in him, but whoever keeps his word, in him the love of God is truly made perfect. We know that we are in him by this. Whoever claims to abide in him must walk just as he walked. So God's love for us, we're just barely getting the slightest little glimpse of that. I don't think we're ever going to completely understand how deep that love for us really is. But we're just getting a little tiny pinch and understanding of it. But, our love for God, how do we learn to love him? Because if you think about it, God's love for us was shown by works. He just didn't say a bunch of stuff and not follow through on it, like we're so capable of doing all the time. Say a lot of words, but don't follow through with action. Works showed his love for us. Mark 12, very common passage here. We know well. One of the Torah scholars came and heard them debating, and seeing that Yeshua had answered them well, he asked him, which commandment is first of all? And Yeshua answered, the first is, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. Simple put here, our love for God is the number one commandment. So it's kind of interesting when you think about this. To keep his commandments is to love him, and to love him is to keep them. Almost like a circle there. Because there wasn't any commandment for him loving us. There was nothing saying he had to do anything for us, show us any grace whatsoever. I don't think he was even bound to show grace to Noah in his day. But he did. And what is that verse? What is the whole duty of man but to fear God and keep his commandments? And when you think about that, keeping his commandments, loving him, fear God, love him. We love him because he first loved us. We were so far from God, especially us Gentiles that were so far removed. Had his word not been declared, had he not intervened and done something, we'd never know how to love him. We'd never have a clue what we needed to do for the Creator. We could take a look at creation and understand he's there, understand that there's some love for us, but how in the world would we know what our part was? How could we ever enter into a relationship? But grace, that whole thing, grace, so much is so hyper grace anymore. And, it's grace this, grace. You hear it all the time. And putting that in it, it's that definition of that's his love for us. It's like, he loves me, he's done this for me. It's all what I get out of it. And you think about even so much worship that we do. We say that our worship is getting our eyes off of ourselves and turning it onto him. And yet we can, without realizing it, still flip it back on ourselves. Lord, I'm just so thankful for everything you've done for me. Thank you for saving me. All good stuff. But I know you're going to do this for me. I know you've promised this for me. And back, me again. Instead of, Lord, you're holy. Lord, you're, putting the worship just on who he is. Regardless, if you do anything for me, I love you and I will serve you. Whether you deliver me from the fire or not, I'm going to obey. It's just takes a big change to start thinking in those directions. He who has my commandments and keeps them is the one who loves me. He who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and reveal myself to him. So interesting. He who has my commandments, I will love him and reveal myself to him. We want to know how to love God, get to know him better. Simple, just start obeying him. Simple, right? Not so much. But if you're struggling to obey him, if you're struggling in loving him, keeping his word and doing what he's required, that we love him because he first loved us. Maybe we don't really realize just how much he loves us. Maybe we don't recognize his love for us. We don't realize the depths we've fallen from, how great his salvation was, and what that cost of that was. So if we're struggling in that arena, maybe we do need to go back and really examine who we are and where we've come from. But once we begin to understand what he's done for us, and we desire to love him and walk that path of discipleship, this is what I want to talk about is the first step. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily the first step, but an essential step in restoring that original faith and obedience is we already touched on this just a minute ago, but Shabbat, a sign of love. Putting that obedience of it back in a different context. So all I want to do here is just a kind of a 101 of sorts on Shabbat. And how many have been trying to keep Shabbat for more than 10 years in here? 5? 3? Okay, now we're starting to hone in. I'm right around that 3 mark, and that's kind of sad because that's one of the big 10, right? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Of course, we've kind of done some stuff with that, but back at the beginning of creation, we just read this in the first portion. The beginning of creation set up that authority. And the word bless, Baruch, who it also has a connection to the same word for knee and for bow. And some of you may know this, this may be new to you, but that's oftentimes why when in a synagogue service, when they get to bless, Baruch atah Adonai, it'll be to bend the knee and to bow. That's done. And it's kind of a neat practice because it's putting that realization of order and authority back into things. And we can see this right here. So the heavens and earth were completed along with their entire array. God completed on the 7th day his work that he made. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, for on it he ceased from all his work that God created for the purpose of preparing. So here he just finished all creation, sun, moon, the stars, the animals, the fish of the sea, us. And it's almost like he took all of that creation and then submitted it to his authority and showed that through Shabbat. All is to bend the knee. At the name of Yeshua, every knee bows. Well, this was kind of starting back in the beginning. All was to bend the knee. It's mentioned here in that kind of context again in Exodus 20. Remember Yom Shabbat to keep it holy. You are to work 6 days and do all your work. But the 7th day is a Shabbat to Adonai your God. In it you shall not do any work, not you, nor your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your cattle, nor the outsider that is in your gates. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. Thus Adonai blessed Yom Shabbat and made it holy. One of the key parts of keeping Shabbat or desiring the Sabbath is acknowledging he is the creator of all. And it's no wonder, as Pastor Kelly's mentioned, as we've removed the Sabbath from culture over the centuries and from faith, that we have removed that acknowledgement of what he's done, and that he is creator, he is king, he makes the rules. Doing what he did during the first week of creation, following in his steps, the 6 days, and stopping and resting on the 7th day is acknowledging that he is king. Already said this, so Bnei Israel is to keep the Shabbat, to observe the Shabbat throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel forever. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he ceased from work and rested. He already touched on this. It's a sign, right? And for how long is it for? Or just to the crucifixion? Or was it just to the resurrection, the ascension, the giving of Spirit on Shabbat? Or did he mean what he said when he said it was forever? And I saw the same connection last night to, what we just read about the sign with Noah, that it was a perpetual covenant. And we don't say that that's gone away. Yeah, God's keeping that promise. That sign stands forever. But he says the same thing about Shabbat, that it's a perpetual sign. But, the sign that God gave with the rainbow to Noah, well, we've seen what the world's done with that sign. Butchered it, turned it around, eliminated part of it, turned it into a representation of an abomination. Sadly, Shabbat's kind of had the same treatment in some respects. It's been butchered, moved around, changed, lost its meaning. But, the common thing is, well, Shabbat's a sign between him and the children of Israel. Well, who are the children of Israel? His people, right? So are we part of his people or not? Are we his people or not? Well, yeah, but we're different, we are. Well, we are part of his people when there's something good to get out of it. If there's a good promise in there, yeah, that's for us. If there's some responsibility that comes with it or something he's asking us to obey, well, that's for them. Kind of forget that one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, one Ruach, one Spirit, one hope, one body. Maybe we're trying to be two bodies. But I really want to talk about putting the Shabbat back in the focus of loving him. The rainbow was a sign, if you think about it, of his love for us. And Shabbat, in a way, is a sign of our love for him. We just finished the fall feast. And as we were learning, over the last few years, I've learned more and more each time we come to the feast. I learn more about it, more meaning, more depth, more what it's telling of the past, more what it's telling of the future. And we talk about, the feast kind of being a dress rehearsal for things to come. And where they're discussed in Leviticus 23 starts out, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to Bnei Israel and tell them, these are the appointed Moedim of Adonai, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, my Moedim, my appointments. Work may be done for 6 days, but the 7th day is a Shabbat of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You are to do no work. It is a Shabbat to Adonai in all your dwellings." So if the feasts are kind of a dress rehearsal, and he puts the very first one up here is the Shabbat, if you think about it, I guess the Shabbat's kind of like a practice for the dress rehearsals. The feasts only come around once a year. Some of them are no more than one day. And they come and they go, but you learn what Shabbat really means and learn how to love him through that. It adds a whole lot more meaning when you get to the feast, because most of them, good chunk of them, are Shabbats, are rests. They take the same thing and they build on it further. So it's like you're practicing. Okay, now it's the time for the dress rehearsal. That's getting ready for the big event one day. So I'm just going to go through it, be here forever with this if I said all I wanted to say. But I wanted to go through some of the 101 Shabbat starters, because some people are new in here, and I know there's been quite a few people tuning in either live or after the fact watching this that are very, a lot of this they don't understand. It's new. But for some of us that have been doing it a while, and for some of you that have been at it a long time, sometimes we need kind of put things back into focus. We can tend to get into a habit of doing things, and it's a habit week after week, and we can kind of lose sight of what it's really about. And I want to do that, putting some of these things that we know already about the Shabbat back into that context of loving Him. The first one, simple here, coming out of Leviticus 23, it's holy, it's set apart. It's not like the other 6 days of the week. It's a set apart day, not just the service. It's the day. This isn't church on Saturdays. It's really not. It isn't that you do what you want to do all the rest of the day. Oh, okay, I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to focus on God here as I go to service, and as soon as it's over, it's back to me. It's a little more than that. It's the day, sunset to sunset. This is the day that He's requested, the day that He wants us to spend with Him. It needs to be set apart. Traditionally, the Sabbath is brought in with the lighting of the candles, and when those candles are lit, it's now I've entered holy time. This was common time. It's not necessarily bad time, but now I've entered holy time. It's something different. We're changing focus around here. And just as much as it has a start to it, it needs to have some sort of an ending to it. We've got to set the day apart from everything else, and that traditionally it's done with the Havdalah service, another lighting of a candle, and some other kind of neat traditions. But in any case, it needs to be set apart. I know for us, we like to blow the shofar at the end of the day, just to have a marker that there's something, okay, holy time is stopped, we're returning to normal time. So it's holy, it's set apart the whole day. It's also a convocation or a gathering. It doesn't mean you can't gather together on any other day of the week. But really, when you think about it, it's a commandment to gather on this day. Yeshua did it. The apostles did it. Paul did it. It's going to be done in the future. And it brings a lot of meaning to that, so much more as you see the day approaching. Need to be more and more faithful with our gathering together, because when we gather together, we're focusing on love for each other. The following Shabbat, almost the entire city came together to hear the word of the Lord. Interesting how in a pagan culture that this was in, they just knew this was the day that this whole city's going to come out to hear the word of the Lord. This is a set apart day for this. So, but why? Why was this a set apart day for this? To hear the word of the Lord, to shema, to obey, to love, learn how to love Him. And, then we get to kind of a big part of this day that kind of is the main discussion point usually we have. It's no work. And really it's because work is self-focused. It's really focusing on you. And we say this blessing at the beginning, change our focus from our things to you. But when I'm working, I'm just focused completely on Him. I can work and focus entirely on Him. I've heard that. I've said that in the past. That no matter what I do, I can do all to Him, and He's at the forefront of my focus. As I'm like, come on, let's be real. I'm focusing entirely on Him as I'm sitting here typing an email out to a client, and as I'm punching in numbers into the computer, and as I'm talking on the phone dealing with problems and thinking about my schedules and all this, yeah, I'm not really focused on him. I can do it to honor him, but my focus isn't on him. And that's evident in the Genesis account. He did that for 6 days. The 7th, he stopped. It's changing our focus from our things to him. Then it brings up that other question, well, what is work? How do you define work? Because we always want to find a little glitch or some little caveat way out of what work is. And we've read this already, created for the purpose of preparing. Word prepare, make something for use, assemble, to compound, to cook. It can mean cooking, composing. Some biblical examples. I could go to a lot of stuff, but just going to go over a few things here. In Exodus 16, this is what Adonai said: tomorrow is a Shabbat rest, a holy Shabbat to Adonai. Bake whatever you would bake, boil what you would boil, store up for yourselves everything that remains to be kept until the morning. Oh, there's a good example right there, preparing and baking. I've just learned this from the kitchen when my wife's cooking. The focus is definitely on the preparation of the meal. That kitchen gets to be busy, it gets messy, there's a lot of cleanup to do, there's a lot of going, fetching, doing this and doing that. And he's saying, no, wait a minute, get all that done ahead of time so that you're not focused on you. I want you and me together here. Another example from Jeremiah, we can read about, thus says Adonai, guard your souls. Carry no burden on the day of Shabbat or bring it through the gates of Jerusalem, nor should you carry a burden out of your houses on Yom Shabbat or do any work, but keep Yom Shabbat holy as I commanded your fathers. So, kind of that no loading, unloading, this just isn't the day for going and gathering up all the trimmings in the yard and deciding to run those down to the landfill. I'm going to be focused on task at hand again. It won't be focused on him. Work is to be done for 6 days, but the 7th day is a holy day for you, a Shabbat of complete rest to Adonai. The rest isn't about us. He gives us rest. It's a very essential part of it. But it isn't so that we can just focus on ourselves again and recoup ourselves. That, when you think about it, as we rest in him, we're recharged, we're refilled. I was thinking about the relationship, with your spouse. That if I went to her and I said, hey, Tuesday's going to be our day. That's the day we're gonna spend together. Maybe it's our anniversary or something like that. And then that day rolls around. Well, hold on just a minute. I forgot. I gotta go run this down to the office before we do anything. And there goes an hour and a half. And I come back and, man, now I'm starving. And nothing's ready to go, so I'm gonna go run down and get something. But hey, you can come along, I guess. We can make a go of it that way. Pretty soon the day just gets filled with all the stuff I had to do. I don't think that would go over real well. Pretty sure she'd say that. I put this one in here, no cheating. We always find a way around. Well, okay, it says, not you, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, cattle out, don't make your animals go fetch it. Don't have your homing pigeon go grab you lunch. I'm not going to work, but I'm going to make the delivery driver have to work. Or, I've got stuff around the house that needs done. I'm not going to do it, but it's okay if somebody comes in and fixes it. Kind of back to yourself. It'd be the same as working on that same day, with your spouse. But, it all takes adjustment. That's one thing I've learned, is it takes adjustment. It's kind of a process. We're so used to everything being about us and about our plans and what we have going on, that when we get to this, it's a struggle. And I like to just say, start with the obvious. There's some things you don't need to, you know that you can change. Start with the obvious, but it takes time to get our focus off of us onto Him. And oftentimes I've found where, I stop something I'm doing, and then there's this big void that I am extremely bored right now. And I'm so used to doing stuff that I've just got to fill it with something. Something. I'm been that way my whole life. I just can't sit still. And until it's filled with Him or something of Him, that's the struggle, I think, is that in between as you're learning. Because, I admit I love myself way more than I need to. And then we come to another one. This is talked about quite a bit. No starting fires. So that's simple, right? It comes from Exodus 35:3. Do not kindle a fire in any of your dwellings on Yom Shabbat. What does that mean? Well, is it in regards to, just baking and cooking? Seems to be a connection to that. Does it mean that if my fireplace goes out and I'm freezing to death, I can't go start it back up again? Is that what it's talking about? Does it mean I can't start my car because there's a spark plug in there? You can go all kinds of directions with this. But you know what? He said it, we obey it. Start with the obvious things. Obviously, we know that there's some stuff with you didn't prepare in time, and now you're having to drop the relationship with Him or the focus on Him to go, get stuff ready to go again, get the fireplace going, whatever it is, cooking, baking, whatever. But I was really thinking about this. This was the first thing that kind of jumped out to me when I first came across this. So the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. See how small a fire sets ablaze, or it's sometimes translated kindles so great a forest. Whew. Think of that, arguments. It seems like during the other 6 days, maybe because we're busy with different things, the arguments don't come up, and then as soon as Shabbat comes around, there's something to argue about. And, and then you start that blaze. And then it takes so long to come down off of that. It's just, this isn't the day to argue, because arguing, it's putting the focus back on us again. I've got to be right. I've got to win this. It's not about Him. Here's another fire that we can start with the tongue. I think about, because I'm guilty of this one. Political talk. Pretty soon it's like, here we go, and we're off, and the next hour is spent talking about every problem going on in the world. Gossip, that should be obvious. We get that fire started, and that's a mighty hard one to put out. But, taking our talk, just the things we talk about on this day, and turning it back to talking of Him in His ways, keeping it holy, setting apart the day, how do we do that, and the things that we do, and I think talk is a big one, because I like to talk about me and my stuff and what I've got going on, and I think we all like to do that to some degree. And there's a time and a place for it, And I'm not saying that we're just dropping every single thing to talk about and, okay, the only thing left to do now is read scripture. But no, it's that whole changing our focus. My point is, it's changing our focus from everything about us, everything about the world, at all the problems, and turning over to Him. Because like we say, not our things, because that's self-focused. It isn't about loving Him, it's about us. Isaiah 58, if you turn back your foot from Shabbat, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call Shabbat a delight, the holy day of Adonai honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, not seeking your own pleasure, not speaking your usual speech. That's loaded. Because most of the stuff we do is just about us. We like to do our things, talk our stuff, and do our pleasures. I love to go fishing. I like, that's a pleasure for me, but I can't, if I'm out there doing that, I'm not with you all. If I'm out there doing that, I can meditate some on Him, but my focus is, just to be honest, my focus is going to be, where do I find Him? How do I do it? It's kind of going our way. I'm going to be running in talking about all kinds of other stuff. It's just not the day for that. It's not our pleasures. It's not about us. It's about His ways, His talk, His speech. And that really makes me see just how Shabbat is so essential to that step of discipleship. Because discipleship is getting your eyes off of the way you were going to go and changing course, and I'm now following the Master. And the only way I'm going to be able to ever follow Him is to get my eyes off of myself and upon Him. And I think Shabbat's a good training, a good practice for that. Isaiah 58 goes on here, and it says, then you will delight yourself in Adonai, and I will let you ride over the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of your father Jacob, for the mouth of Adonai has spoken. When you decrease, He can then increase. And right here, I will let you ride over the heights of the earth. This is all in the context of Shabbat. When you're riding with Him and you're seeing everything from the 40,000-foot view, and you're looking down at earth and everything going on, and now you see it from His perspective, you spent time with Him, and it's like all of a sudden your focus realigns, wait, He's got this. All the problems going on in the world, everything going on in my life, He has this. It changes perspective a lot. And He feeds you with the heritage of your father Jacob. That's a completely another topic. The heritage of your father Jacob. It's so much change, just that unplugging from the world, changing from our text to, His, all about my face, what I want, to His book, our books, His talk, our talk. It's just changing that focus, and that's hard. That other one, refraining from buying and selling, because that's self-focused. When the peoples of the land bring merchandise or any kind of grain on Shabbat, we will not buy from them on Shabbat or a holy day. You think about it, you're making somebody else work, and you're increasing either in money or in goods. It's something for yourself. When you start looking at all of these different things, you can really see how it's get off of yourself. Get off of yourself. Spend time with me. And doing good. Because that's others focused. This kind of doing on Shabbat is different than all the stuff we stop doing. How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Therefore, it is permitted to do good on Shabbat. Once you get rid of yourself, and you can set yourself aside, then, only then, do you really have room for God and others. Because, if you love him, you keep his commandments. And what is the second commandment? Second greatest commandment? To love your neighbor. So this one, a daughter of Abraham, incapacitated by Satan for 18 years, shouldn't she be set free from this imprisonment on the Sabbath day? And that verse, when you really let that sink in, Shabbat isn't bondage. It's really a day of freedom. Because the greatest bondage I've known in my life has been myself. Freedom from myself, freedom from Satan, freedom from the world. I've just learned to love setting aside the news for a day. Just shut it off and get it out. I almost hate turning it back on. Remember God's works, because that's him focused. Observe Yom Shabbat to keep it holy, as Adonai your God commanded you. 6 days you are to labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat to Adonai your God. In it you are not to do any work, not you, or your son, or your daughter, or your slave, or your maid, or your ox, or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the outsider within your gates, so that your slave and your maid may rest as you do. You must remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, Adonai your God commanded you to keep Yom Shabbat. All our pleasures, all our ways, all our comings and goings, everything we talk about, the only reason we can do or have anything the other 6 days of the week is him. That rest in there is essential. That stopping, recharging, it's an essential part of it. I thought it was interesting back in Genesis 2, verse 15. I brought this up last week, how I always read it that the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden in order to dress and keep it. And then I read it in this one, and it said, and the Lord God took the man and gave him rest in the Garden of Eden in order to tend to it and keep it. That really stood out to me because, he just took the man, made man, and then instituted the Shabbat. And it's almost like in order for you to do the other 6 days that he wants you to do, this is important, that first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you rest so that you can do his will. And as we remember his works of the past and, on all the blessings we've had this last week that we take for granted and fail to remember. But it's also that focus on the kingdom to come. And that, again, that's him focused. This is a practice, right? It's supposed to be practice for things to come. And it will come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Shabbat to another, all flesh will come to bow down before me, says Adonai. Now it will always be about loving him, about the acknowledging of his authority, that he is king in my life. Now I wanted to share this because this was the first thing kind of that the Lord dealt with me on, was this. Some people, it's other things that he deals with first. But my life up to when I came to know the Lord was so me focused. And I remember the first time I walked in to the synagogue on a Shabbat to listen to hear Joshua Aaron. And something just, I don't know how to put it. I walked out and something just burned inside. It was like I felt for a moment that I just completely had lost myself. I wasn't involved with myself at all during that. And I walked out and, wow, what happened? What? That was different. And as the Lord started to work on me more about that, I realized the cost that it was going to have. Because up to that point, I'd been so about me my whole life, to the point where it had ruined what I thought had ruined my life, ruined my family. And I remember something my mom had always said. It's like, Ty, you never stop. You just go, go, go all the time. And I hope one day that you can learn how to just stop and rest a little bit. And I don't think she ever understood that this is where this was going, but then I started to realize that cost that it was going to have, because at that point I was working in project management, and I started running all through my mind, like, boy, if I start down this, my crews that are under me are out working on Saturday. How am I going to deal with that? Phone calls always come in on Saturday. And then I did fishing charters, and Saturday was my biggest money-making day. It was like most of that business was routed around me doing that on Saturday. And when I realized that was when I was like, okay, reset, just forget all this. I'm going back to the comfort zone. I want to see if this is really what the Lord's dealing with me on, or if this is something that, I just need to clear my mind a little bit. And went about 5 months just going about things as usual, and I started finding myself, out and about when I was doing things. There's nobody out there that cared, but almost like I was running and hiding and felt ashamed. And I know there's something wrong that I'm doing. I'm focusing on me. I know there's something wrong here. It's not anybody else out there, but it was almost like, God was right there and I was running from him. And I don't remember the event that took place that finally I just said, you know what? This is the first step. If I'm going to follow him, this is the first step I'm going to have to make, is stopping myself for a little bit so that I can learn more what he wants from me. And when I made that decision, it's kind of weird, but that same next week, my position changed from project management into estimating. I now have my own schedule. Saturday, no big deal. Not an issue anymore. And when I closed everything up with my fishing on Saturday, that next year brought in twice as much as I had up to that point. started finding that people were more excited to not go on Saturday than they were than I would have thought. The Lord just, where He calls, He makes a way. And it's hard. I know we all got situations that go on. All I can say is I want to be an encouragement in it if at all possible. And if I can help or, to ease that burden in some way, I'd love to help because I've been there, done it. And I really do think when we give ourselves to Him and really make the decision to follow Him, He provides, He makes a way. He does. He's promised that, and not to say that it doesn't come with some sacrifice, because it does. But I just want to take this day and just really make it about focusing upon Him, not about us.